The 697th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for 2. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding? Into Dixon. Boozer switches onto him. Dixon the kick. Trimble! Got it! And Carolina wins it!
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Wednesday night here to talk about, I guess, the first day, if you will, of the Carolina basketball's head coaching search as obviously last night they officially fired Hubert Davis and they are now beginning their search for a new head basketball coach with all signs pointing towards a break from the traditional way that Carolina has done things, hiring a former player or an assistant. Carolina is using a search firm, and they're going to conduct a national search to find the next man qualified to lead Carolina basketball into 2026, 2027, and beyond. So we're going to talk about all of the early candidates that have emerged. If you don't know their names by now, those names include Tommy Lloyd from Arizona, Dusty May from Michigan, and TJ Ozelberger from Iowa State, along with a lot of smoke around Billy Donovan, the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about those four candidates here tonight on this edition of the show. But we start every edition, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. And we go to Lou Holtz for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, "Winners embrace hard work. They love the discipline of it. The trade-off they're making to win. Losers, on the other hand, see it as punishment, and that's the difference." I think that's what Carolina is looking for. And you're going to hear from AD and waiting Steve Newmark on what they're looking for in a new head coach. But they've made it very clear. They are looking for an established, distinguished winner. Someone that has already proven they can win at the highest level, at the collegiate level, and whether that coach is currently in college or maybe in the NBA will ultimately determine which direction this search goes. But if you're sitting here thinking that there's a chance that Carolina could hire a Kenny Smith, could they maybe promote from within and promote a Brad Frederick or promote a Sean May to the head coaching position, you need to move on from that way of thinking. The next head coach that Carolina hires, and they believe they're going to be able to lure a big name, is going to be one that is an established winner. And that's something that, Hubert Davis was not when Carolina hired him, when Roy Williams handpicked him to succeed him as the head coach. That was something that Matt Doherty was not back in 2000 when he was in place to succeed Bill Guthridge. It was also something that Bill Guthridge was not. But he was a longtime assistant to Dean Smith, had a lot of top flight recruits in place back in the day and time where your roster didn't change like it does now in college basketball. And so I don't want to use this quote as a way to disparage Hubert Davis and refer to him as a loser, but I do think Carolina's made it very clear what they're looking for. They are looking for a winner, an established winner, and that's where their search is going to lead them over the next week or so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to put it, is that the part of the quote that you're taking away and really applying to Carolina in this instance is the winning part. And that's where, we knew that Carolina was going to go after we heard the initial rumors that Carolina was looking to move on from him. All the reporting was that they were going to end up moving in a direction where they were going to go outside the family. They were going to find someone that's an established winner. And I think, it's probably the right thing to do right now, because there just isn't anybody inside the family that you feel confident is established enough to be able to get Carolina where they want to go. They made this move to be more competitive. They made this move to get back to the standard that we are used to at Carolina, not, settling for, this year, potentially what would have been a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament if you had a healthy Caleb Wilson. They want to get to a point where they're better than that, where year in and year out, we're talking about a team that's a top 2-3 seed in the NCAA tournament. Maybe 4 at the minimum. That's where I think Carolina feels like they should be at every single year. And they want to be competing for conference titles again. They want to be competing for conference tournament titles. And of course, they want to be competing when you get to the NCAA tournament. And so in order to do that, it feels like you have to go out and find somebody that's doing that right now and doing it at the highest level. And that's where you start your search, because this is Carolina basketball. So if you're going outside the family, you're starting with the best of the best. And I think that's what we've seen from Carolina so far. I think it's the way that we were hoping Carolina would go if they chose this route. And so far, relatively satisfied with the names that Carolina is going after out of the gate here.
Yeah, I don't think you look at the initial names that are on the board, the names that I mentioned, you cannot be upset at where they want to at least begin their coaching search. And I think the belief around the industry is Carolina might strike out on one top candidate. They might strike out on 2. This isn't going to be like Kentucky a few years ago, what Indiana has suffered the last 3 times that job has come open. They expect Carolina to be able to land one of the 4 names that we're going to talk about extensively tonight. And if they don't land one of those 4, the good news is there are still a bunch of qualified big-time coaches that have made it known they're interested in the gig, like a Nate Oates at Alabama. You've got Todd Golden at Florida, a Mark Byington at Vanderbilt, a Grant McCaslin at Texas Tech, that I think we can all sit here and admit would be immediate upgrades over what you had on the bench with Hubert Davis. Even with Hubert having gone to a Final Four, with what those coaches have done at their respective institutions, there's a higher degree of coaching that Carolina would be putting on the sidelines if they weren't able to land one of the 4 names. But as I mentioned, the head coaching search is well underway. Carolina is also going to they've contracted a search firm to help them during this process as well. I think that's really more probably just to expedite this and really narrow this thing down and get the most qualified candidates to the surface quickly as possible. As I mentioned, Inside Carolina has reported the 3 big names atop the list include Arizona's Tommy Lloyd, Michigan's Dusty May, and Iowa State's TJ Ozelberger. With Billy Donovan, the head coach of the Bulls, his candidacy is coming more so from his camp, from his people in Chicago. as an exit strategy for him to leave the Bulls very well could be unfolding with the NBA regular season winding down. And that franchise is really in no man's land. They're not going to the NBA playoffs. They're not even competing to be a play-in team this year. And it could be like it could be looking like a time for Billy Donovan to either look for a job in the NBA somewhere else or maybe make a return to college where he has not coached since 2014. I mentioned I had some audio of Steve Newmark I wanted to bring to you guys. We have a bunch of audio about the coaching search. You're going to hear from Dusty May. You're going to hear from TJ Ozelberger. And you're also going to hear from Jeff Goodman tonight as well. But Steve Newmark and Bubba Cunningham, they sat down last night with Jones Angel and Adam Lucas on the Carolina Insider podcast after the news was made official that Hubert Davis had been fired. And they talked about what they are looking for in their new head basketball coach.
For us to do right by the Carolina family, we have to make sure we get the best candidate possible, the one who can lead us for years to come and have us competing for national championships on an annual basis. So when we look at that, if you look at our incredible history and legacy of coaches here, almost all of them were great teachers. They were great strategists. They were great leaders. And so we really will try to ensure that whoever comes in and sits in this seat embodies all of those characteristics, and importantly, that they have a respect for tradition. And, part of our tradition is having coaches who are innovators and build great cultures. And then at the end, we also need to recognize that the landscape continues to change in collegiate athletics. And so we need to have somebody who is adept and understands that and will be able to navigate that going forward.
All right. So there you go. That's Steve Newmark talking about what Carolina is looking for. If you listen to the interview, and I listened to the whole podcast this afternoon on my way home from work, about 13 minutes. It took about 8 minutes in before the Carolina family was mentioned. The Carolina family was brought up because, Carolina had to fire one of their own and arguably as universally beloved a member of that family as there is for a lot of Carolina fans that are in their 40s or their 50s. Hubert Davis might have been their favorite Tar Heel when they were falling in love with the team back when they were our age growing up. And then they saw him on TV. You see him on the sidelines with Roy Williams for 9 years, and he led Carolina with the grace and the dignity that we expect out of our head coach. And so there's some pain right now. There is some hurt right now, and I think you've seen a lot of different mixed emotions on social media from some members that don't understand the move and some that do understand the move. And that's kind of the sense around where Roy Williams falls into this is that he may not have liked the decision that Steve Newmark, Bubba Cunningham, Chancellor Lee Roberts, what they came to, but was also probably very understanding of why they got to that decision, because he would tell you that the last 5 years had not met the standard of Carolina basketball, because there were times that he felt like he didn't live up to the standard, despite going to the Final Four 5 times and winning 3 national championships during his illustrious career on the Carolina bench. What do you make of what Steve Newmark had to say about the Carolina family and the importance of history and tradition as their coaching search begins?
Yeah, I think that's what we want to hear, right? Is that the person that you're bringing in is going to be somebody that is clearly established, which is something that you want. You want someone that's also going to be able to adjust to the modern game as it changes over the next handful of years, because it feels like this game is always changing. And that's why I think going with a younger coach probably makes a lot more sense. And again, when we talk younger coach, we're not talking about a guy that's in his 30s. We're talking about somebody that's, in his 50s, somewhere in that area where they could be around Carolina for, 15, 20 years, somewhere in that space. And so I think that's kind of what you're looking for as well. And then, when you talk about the Carolina family, again, it's not going to be a member of the family, but you want someone that understands the history of Carolina basketball and really wants to continue to build upon what Dean Smith was able to do, what Roy Williams was able to do. They have to have respect for both of those guys. And, I'm not saying they have to base everything that they do off of them, but you would like to have somebody that, really wants to, continue to push some of the stuff that these guys were, known for, and that they pushed during their time on campus at Carolina. And so I hope that's what Carolina is ultimately going to get. I think there are a lot of guys, especially, in that age range that I talked about of, late 40s to early 50s, guys that do have respect for what Dean Smith was able to build, do have respect for what Roy Williams was able to build. And I think you're going to find some guys that definitely do have those values that they'll bring to the table, and that respect that they'll bring to the table for both of those guys. So I think that means that you're going to be able to get a pretty good candidate out there. I think all these guys that are on the table probably have met that requirement, or they feel like will meet that requirement. And so I feel like Carolina is going to get someone that's a good guy. I mean, you saw, from inside Carolina, one of the things that they reported earlier today is they don't expect any coaches with controversies in their background to become primary candidates. So you wonder why Todd Golden isn't on the list here. This could be one of the reasons why Todd Golden doesn't show up. I know that that's something that's in the past. They went through, investigated that, and they've moved on. But it feels like that could be one of the reasons why Carolina is saying, you know what, we're just not even going to entertain that. And that could also be one of the reasons why there's a strong push from a camp like Nate Oates, and Carolina is saying, nah, we're good right now. We'll see if we have to circle back around to that sometime later on down the line. But I think they probably want someone that is pretty squeaky clean in terms of their background. And I think that's something that you should want if you're a Carolina fan as well. So, hopefully, this group that Carolina is going after, this first tier of coaches that they're going after, produces the guy for Carolina, because I think if it does, then we're going to get someone that we really like here in Chapel Hill.
All right, let's go ahead and dive into the candidates. Before we do that, though, we do have to make it known that earlier this morning, Brad Stevens, the president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics, has already made it known he's not interested in the vacancy at Carolina. This should not come as a surprise. Carolina obviously was going to have to make the phone call to gauge his interest, but he's turned down Indiana the last 3 times Indiana has come open. If he's not leaving Boston to go back to Indiana, where he had so much success in that state with Butler, probably a very good chance that Brad Stevens will never coach again in college basketball. Nonetheless, you have to make him tell you no, because of how young he is. He's still just 49, to go along with how bright he is. He's one of the best basketball minds still in the game today. So, but he has already made it known he will not be stepping down from his position with the Celtics to go coach Carolina, amid the job being made open and being made vacant. So the first candidate we have to talk about that inside Carolina has made it known is very high on the priority list for UNC is Tommy Lloyd. He's the Arizona coach. He's got the Wildcats as a 1 seed right now in the NCAA tournament. They'll take on, Arkansas once the Sweet 16 gets started later this week. And in his 5 years as a head coach, he has compiled a 146-35 record that, if you round up, that's an 81% winning percentage. He's won the regular season 3 times. He's won his conference tournament 3 times, has yet to break through and get to the Final Four, but it just feels like that's only a matter of time. We don't have any audio from Tommy Lloyd, but as he was doing his NCAA tournament media availability, of course, the speculation was brought up, and he addressed it and answered by saying, quote, "I already have one of the best jobs in the country. One thing we talk about in our program all the time is the ability to have full focus and be present in the moment. This team deserves my full focus. There's not one thing that is going to knock me off my path. I am 100% focused on Arizona basketball and this program," end quote. Some background on Tommy: a longtime assistant to Mark Few at Gonzaga. We know how close Roy Williams and Mark Few are. They've had a long-standing relationship even before meeting in the 2017 national championship game. So this is a guy that, even as an outsider, Roy Williams would probably vouch for when having to make it known that this could be the potential hire for Carolina basketball, as Roy Williams is still, with Hubert Davis fired, even more so, the active face of the Carolina family that used to have so much influence into decisions like this. Look, you watch college basketball, you follow college basketball. Arizona's a proud program. Dating back to their time with Lloyd Olson, you had Sean Miller take them to multiple Elite Eight runs, and now you've got Tommy Lloyd, who is maybe the best coach in the sport right now without a trip to the Final Four on his resume. What do you make of him being maybe the number one candidate for Carolina in their head coaching search?
He should be number one because he's number one on my list right now as well. The only thing that you wonder about is the postseason success, because the furthest that he's gotten in the postseason is the Sweet 16. And so, he can check a lot of boxes this weekend. I think that certainly is something that Carolina fans will be keeping an eye on, even though that would potentially drag this out a little bit further in terms of trying to get him to campus at Carolina. So I think Tar Heel fans are probably conflicted in that nature, but you look at what he's been able to do there. I mean, a 146-35 record at Arizona, really phenomenal. He's done a great job against some of the top teams that he's faced year in and year out. And, the thing about it took him almost no time to come in and establish Arizona as one of the best teams in the country. I mean, they were a team that, they were having some success under, Sean Miller previous to that. But I think, for him to come in his first season, on the bench, first season as a head coach at the college level, comes in and goes 33-4. I think that certainly speaks to the type of coach that he is. He hasn't missed the NCAA tournament so far. I mean, the worst that his team was a year ago when they were 24-13, and they still got into the NCAA tournament rather comfortably. The other years he's either been a regular season or conference tournament champ, overlapping in some of those years. So he's been a guy that's just done everything that he's needed to do at Arizona. And, you talk about the background, definitely going to be a squeaky clean guy. There's nothing that you could see that would concern you about him coming in as a coach. And then you mentioned, I think, one of the most important things about him that I think really makes this something that I want, which is that this is a guy that Roy Williams would probably sign off on. Roy is very close with Mark Few. He coached under Mark Few as an assistant for 20 years. And so I think this is a guy that Mark Few would really like and would say would definitely vouch for. And I think if he's willing to vouch for him, then Roy Williams would be able or would be willing to vouch for him if they asked his opinion, which again, I am still of the opinion that they should be asking Roy Williams what direction they should be going in for this head coaching search. I'm the guy that believes that Roy should be part of the committee that's in that room that's put together from Carolina to make the decision on who the next head coach is going to be, because he is the face of the Carolina family right now. I think he should be included in that decision. And so I think this would be the guy that he would sign off on. I think there's great reason to believe that he would sign off on him. And the other thing is that Tommy Lloyd is, only 51 years old. I think it was 50 when I saw it earlier today. He's a guy that still has some of that longevity to go in his coaching career. It still feels like he's a very young coach. So I think this is the perfect hire out there for Carolina. Does it end up working out? I'm not 100% sure about that. But I do think that, first of all, his statement that he made did not suggest that he's staying and turning down the job in any stretch of the imagination. You didn't hear him mention North Carolina anywhere in there. So, that certainly leaves the door open for him to possibly take another job. Secondly, I think if he finds a way to make a run in this NCAA tournament, which we think is more than possible, if he gets past Arkansas, I think we both believe that he has a really good chance of ending up in the Final Four. Then this should be someone that many Tar Heel fans are pounding the table for and hoping will be the coach at the end of the day.
I think some of the positives that you look at Tommy Lloyd, and could be really interested and excited about a potential hire of him. Look at the way that he's been able to keep players in his program. So he's been able to keep 3-4 year guys around while also bringing in high-end talent like a Koa Pete, who's going to be a one-and-done freshman, also with the international flavor that his rosters have featured. That's one thing from his time at Gonzaga and Mark Few. He has established relationships overseas, and we're seeing more of that influence in college basketball. You saw Carolina bring in Luka Bogovac. That experiment didn't maybe go as well as they wanted to, and I think that's something where Carolina wants to be recruiting. I think they want to. I think they want to have an international presence because of how much talent is overseas. That's right. That's right in his wheelhouse. You can look at not having made a Final Four and maybe get somewhat discouraged. I think it's a reminder that it's not easy to get there. Like it's the NCAA tournament's the hardest championship to win in North American sports. Getting to the Final Four, you can argue, is just as hard to get to any stage as there is like the Super Bowl in the NFL or the Stanley Cup final in hockey, whichever one you want to use, because you see big time coaches struggle to get there. And Tommy Lloyd is big time. And it's only just a matter of time before he does eventually break through and get to coach on college basketball's biggest stage. The one thing I worry about with him and I wonder about with him is he's a West Coast guy. And it's very rare you see the West Coast guys come to the East Coast. It's usually the other way around, where guys on the East Coast, they chase the West Coast lifestyle because it's a different lifestyle out there. I've never experienced it. I have no desire to experience it, but everyone that talks about it says it's just different. It's a lot more, feels like it's a lot more free, a lot more relaxed, if you will. And so would he want to give up, living on the West Coast to come to the East Coast, to come to Chapel Hill, North Carolina? With that being said, if he should be among your top candidates. Is he my top candidate? He is not. Would I be upset about a Tommy Lloyd hire? Absolutely not. I've watched what he's done at Arizona at the Pac-12 and now what he's doing with Arizona at the Big 12. Very envious of the regular season success, very envious of the conference tournament success. And it feels like when you get your bracket, you can write Arizona at least to the Sweet 16 every year. I mean, that's something that we haven't been able to do with Carolina over the last 7 years. So this is going to be a name to monitor. How his team performs over the weekend could really be a telling point for, if his team gets sent packing in the Sweet 16, does that speed up this process? Or if his team does advance to the Final Four, does this delay the potential process? Because the expectation is that, the way the industry works is once you get to the Final Four, the carousel dies because everyone is at the Final Four, doing different conventions and whatnot. So I think he'll be a guy that we're watching very closely this weekend as his team competes in the NCAA tournament. Another name we're going to be watching very closely is the head coach of Michigan, Dusty May. He's been a head coach for 8 years at Florida Atlantic, and he's now in his second year on the bench in Ann Arbor. And he has compiled a 186-82 record, which is a 69% winning clip, a very nice record, if you will. He's won the regular season twice. He's won his conference tournament twice, and he has been in the Final Four when he took the Owls on that run as an 8 seed a few years ago. I mentioned we had some audio from certain guys that we're going to play. Dusty May joined our guy Zach Gelb on his show on YouTube. This was yesterday, and he was talking about how happy he is at Michigan and how in a lot of ways he already has his dream job.
It's kind of so stupid what we do as a media, because you get a job like Michigan and there are going to be other marquee jobs that open up in the coming weeks, and your name will get thrown out there. Like, is Michigan your dream job? Are you as happy as you ever been?
I'm incredibly happy at Michigan. We love Ann Arbor. This place has been great to us. It's made us feel like home. No, my dream job was probably a really good high school in Southern Indiana. No, I told someone the other day, if you told me that I was going to be the third assistant at University of Michigan at this stage of my career, I probably would have thought that I hit the lottery. But you talk about dream jobs, it probably would have been Bloomington South or Bloomington North. Bloomington North is an old buddy of mine from travel ball, and in Bloomington South is a legendary coach, Jer Holmes, whose son's John Holmes, who's at Miami of Ohio now. And so I don't want to put any heat on those athletic directors, but those two jobs were probably my two dream jobs.
All right, so there you go. There's Dusty May with Zach Gill talking about how he's very happy with where he is at. And in a lot of ways, he has already exceeded what his dream job expectation would have been when he got into the coaching profession. You got to remember, this was a guy that was the Indiana student manager. Could have been a guy that Indiana could have sought to bring in to go back to another guy from the Bob Knight days, but he's now instead at a rival school in the Big Ten. Michigan's a really good job. Michigan is a rare athletic department that where football is king. They have a lot of tradition. They have a lot of success, and they value winning in basketball as much as any quote-unquote football school if you will. With that being said, Michigan is not North Carolina. North Carolina, with all of its resources, the rich tradition, the money that is going to be made available to the next head coach, I would argue is a better job. Your thoughts on what Dusty May had to say there and his candidacy for Carolina's opening?
Yeah, I think he, a very humble guy. I think that's one thing that you definitely like about him. You said this was yesterday, right? That he ended up speaking on this. So this was before Carolina was officially open. And so I'm not saying that he didn't know that job would come open. I think there were probably rumors that he had heard, but Carolina's one of, if not the biggest job in the sport. And so I think for that job to come open, I think might make him think a little bit differently. Look, I think again, you didn't hear that it's completely off the table, anything like that. Especially there, you didn't hear anything that would suggest that. I mean, he definitely loves being where he's at. I can tell that. But, I think that certainly Carolina has a chance if they want it. And, this is another guy that again, it's really hard to poke holes in the resume that he has. I mean, you go back and look at the success that he was able to have at Florida Atlantic. I mean, you turn this into a team that ends up making it to the Final Four as a program that was heavily underfunded, especially during the modern era of the sport. And you end up making that team into what it eventually was, that roster, which was, a really great roster for a mid-major, turns into one that's being picked apart by power conference schools, and ends up, producing a national champion in Elijah Martin, who eventually goes on to Florida. Those guys were developed by Dusty May. And so you look at the success that he had there, and now, the success that he had at Michigan. Michigan was a dumpster fire when he took over. It was a complete disaster from what Juwan Howard had done. And, he leads them to the NCAA tournament in the first year. He leads them to a conference tournament championship in year one. And then you look at what he's done this year, 33-3 so far this season. And they were one of the most dominant teams in all of college basketball. So I definitely think that he is a guy that's very attractive because of the winning that he has done, what the stages that he has gotten to in the postseason already so far. If he ends up making it to the Final Four again this year, you've already taken 2 programs to the Final Four, so that would certainly be something that would be a feather in his cap. And then the other thing that you really like about him is you look at how he has used the transfer portal to build some of his rosters. That's kind of what you're looking for at Carolina too. Yeah, I get it, man. Recruiting the high school ranks is great. That's certainly something that you want Carolina to do at a high level. But at the same time, the best way to build some of these contenders nowadays and the teams that win national championships are in large part due to the transfers that they bring in. And so I think you've got to find that healthy balance. I think that that's what Dusty May is ultimately trying to find at Michigan right now. But he's done a really good job. I mean, you talk about landing maybe the best player that was in the transfer portal this past year in Yaxel Lendeberg, who's been absolutely tremendous for Michigan for the entire season. He ends up landing Elliot Cadeau, and look at what he's developed Elliot Cadeau into. And there's plenty of other guys that he's been able to get in as well. So I think this would be a very worthwhile candidate for Carolina to consider. I would not have him over Tommy Lloyd. I think Tommy Lloyd, especially, with the blessing that you get from Roy Williams, would probably be my first choice, but Dusty May has to be pretty high on the list as well, especially with what he's accomplished here over the course of the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think I would probably lean Dusty May over Lloyd, but it's not by much. And a lot of it is because of what he was able to do at Florida Atlantic, and taking a school like that to the Final Four. It feels like Michigan is going to break through and get there. This year, they were my pick in my bracket to win the national championship. I think you're talking about elite recruiter, with the ability to identify talent in the portal. You look at, if you go and watch just the way they play, fun style of basketball. They're very high scoring. They do it with the bigs. So it would feel a lot like, what you and I grew up with watching this program under Roy Williams. But you could not go wrong with him. Just like you could not go wrong with Tommy Lloyd. And I do feel like the thing with these two guys specifically, you look at how young they are. I don't think they're NBA guys. I think they would be here for the long haul. And I think that would really give you a chance to really groom the next Carolina guy to be your head coach whenever this would be done. You're hoping 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I do think that's important. And I do think something that Carolina will value, because I don't think they want this to become the norm. Every time this job becomes available, they're hiring a non-Carolina guy. You hire one of these two dudes, you could have them on the bench for 15 to 20 years, and that would give a Marcus Page or someone like that to really emerge as a legitimate coaching candidate the next time the job were to come available. We'll be watching Dusty May in Michigan very closely this weekend in the Sweet 16. Another name we'll be watching in the NCAA tournament, and you've made it known how Tommy Lloyd is your number one candidate. This is my number one candidate of the guys that Carolina is targeting to begin with. And that's TJ Ozelberger. He's the head coach at Iowa State. And you're talking about a guy that has taken that program to 3 Sweet 16s in 5 years. He's been a head coach for 10 years. He has compiled a record of 223 and 115, which does come out to a win percentage of 66%, but he was 70 and 33 at South Dakota State, was under 500 at UNLV, but revived that dormant program. He was 29 and 30. And since getting to Ames, he's 124 and 52, and he inherited a roster, a program that won 2 games the year before he got there. His first year on the job, he won 22 games. And as I mentioned, he has, won 3 or taken them to 3 Sweet 16s. He has won 2 regular season conference titles, 3 tournament titles. He has not been to a Final Four, has not obviously won a national championship, does have a 7-6 record in the NCAA tournament. But if you watch his teams, they, first off, really good defensively, really sound defensively. And I don't know if there's a team in the country that maximizes their talent more than Iowa State. I don't know if there's a team in the country that plays harder than Iowa State. How many times did we get on here and talk about, after losses and even wins, Carolina looked disinterested? The energy, the effort, the enthusiasm, the 3 buzzwords of Hubert Davis was not there. That very rarely happens with a TJ Ozelberger led team. And so before we talk more about him, he met with the media earlier today and did address his name coming up in coaching searches, but did not mention North Carolina specifically.
First, I'd just like to start by saying any speculation with me and any other jobs or opportunities is not true. The coach of the Cyclones, thrilled to be the coach of the Cyclones, and what I can say to you even more as we move forward together is the alignment on our campus with Dr. Cook, Jamie Pollard is amazing, and we're thrilled and excited about our future together. So really appreciative and grateful to Jamie Pollard and David Cook and conversations we've had, and so just excited about our future. So that's topic number 1. There's no questions about it. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing else to answer. That's the truth.
All right, so there is TJ Ozelberger, and we also got a tweet from the Iowa State AD earlier in the evening, and that tweet read as followed, quote, "Excited for Cyclone Nation that TJ is not going anywhere. He will be our basketball coach for a long time. Now let's have an exciting and successful time this weekend in Chicago. Hashtag road to the Final Four," end quote. What do you make of TJ Ozelberger? He is my preferred choice of the initial top-tier coaches that Carolina is set to target. What do you make of the head coach of Iowa State and his potential chances of being the next head coach at North Carolina?
Yeah, probably the strongest statement that we have seen from somebody on this. I think that was probably as secure as you could feel if you're one of these programs based off of what your head coach said. But at the same time, we've seen coaches like this say stuff before. This is a statement that you got to put out. But we've seen before that things change very, very quickly. And especially when money is at stake, when money talks, I think it can change things very quickly. I think, with what TJ Ozelberger has done at Iowa State, I think has been outstanding. I mean, this team has not missed the NCAA tournament under him. And, part of that is the fact that they are a team that is in the Big 12. So, their margin for error is a little bit thinner. But you look at really the last 3 years, that's where he's really come into his own. His first 2 seasons at Iowa State, 22-13, 19-14. They were, solid years. You got the team to the NCAA tournament. But really over the last few years, that's where he's really settled into a groove. And I mean, he's had this team inside of the top 5 in the AP poll each of those seasons. He's gotten a conference tournament championship back in 23-24. You look at what the team did this year, one of the best teams in the country, one of the highest rated 2 seeds going into the NCAA tournament. And so, this is definitely a guy that I think should be pretty high on a lot of people's list. I would have him probably second on my list right now, because I think the thing that you really like about him is that we know that Iowa State is not pumping a ton of money into their program. They don't have the high-end boosters that some of these other programs are going to have. And so, for them, I think the most important thing is that you find a coach that can develop talent. And it feels like that's what TJ Ozelberger has been able to do just about as well as anybody in the country. A guy that is doing more with less. And I think that's something that should really attract you to him if you're Carolina. Not saying that we need to worry about the money not being there. According to all the reports that we've seen, the money's going to be there. There's a reason why they are going out and going big game hunting, is because they feel like the money is going to be there. But, this is a guy that, doesn't necessarily need the money to be able to succeed. He doesn't need that huge influx of cash to be able to put together a roster that is going to be competitive with some of the best in the entire country. And so I really like the pickup. I mean, you look at, or I would really like the pickup. You look at, what he's been able to do with some of the guys on his roster. I mean, this year coaches a consensus All-American in Joshua Jefferson. Also coaches the best three-point shooter in the entire sport in Milan Momcilovic. They are one of the most interesting teams to watch, and something that I think that you said that I think Tar Heel fans should be really excited about is that this is a guy that demands excellence from his guys. And I think that's something that you want on the sidelines at Carolina. I'm not saying that there wasn't a similar standard under Hubert Davis, but you didn't see it nearly as much as you see it when you watch Iowa State games, where it's very rare that you watch an Iowa State game and say, man, the energy level looked a little bit off there. Man, they didn't really look as locked in as they needed to look for this game, especially in big games. And so I feel like this would be another one of those home run hires for Carolina. Like I said, I have him right behind Tommy Lloyd on my list, but he isn't that far behind him. And I think he is certainly someone that Tar Heel fans should be monitoring as we go into this weekend here with the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight.
Yeah, look, he's saying and doing all the right things. And I think you got to commend these coaches for knowing how to handle the questions that they're going to be peppered with, whether they're doing radio show interviews or just meeting with the local and assembled media prior to their Sweet 16 games that they'll be coaching in respectively later this week. And like Iowa State's a really good program. It's a solid program. They've got they've got a passionate fan base. But you're never going to have the resources available to you in Ames that you'll have in Chapel Hill. What he's done with $5 million in NIL is really impressive. It also just makes you wonder, if he had $15 million, how much more success could he have? I also think there's a toughness about him that I think Carolina is just lacking. And then I think I could really appreciate that style of basketball being ingrained into the way that we watch this team play, and how they want to conduct themselves. So, I look at this as a guy that, for me, this is option number one. And I know he hasn't gone to a Final Four, but you're talking about 3 different stops of success. As opposed to Tommy Lloyd, the 1 at Arizona, the 2 for Dusty May with FAU and Michigan. I think wherever TJ Ozelberger is going to go, he's going to win. I think he would look really, really good in a Carolina blue polo that's a size too small, because my man has guns. He's willing. He's not afraid to show off. And I love everything about him. Iowa State's one of my favorite teams as a junkie to tune in and watch, and I could get really used and comfortable to watching that on my team, on my team's floor 35 to 40 times any given season. And so for the top candidates, he would be my preferred choice. And then I would have Dusty May, and then I would have Tommy Lloyd. Those would be my 1, 2, 3 of the initial guys that Inside Carolina is reporting that they are targeting as their coaching search does begin. Let's now get to another name where there's a lot of smoke and there's a lot of interest, but per Inside Carolina, the interest right now is more from their side as opposed to our side. And that's Billy Donovan. He's the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. You're talking about a guy, though, that is a proven winner at the college level. Won back-to-back national championships at Florida, and went to 4 Final Fours. But he has been in the NBA now for over a decade. He left the Florida Gators, I believe, in 2014, went to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and has been with Chicago, I think, for the past 7 years. He did release a quote earlier tonight before their game against the 76ers, and Billy Donovan said, quote, "My main focus is on these guys and this new team. Understand that there's stuff out there and understand that there's going to be certain speculation, but I have to concentrate on this group, and really my focus is on what we're doing here in Chicago and having a game tonight and traveling to go play in a back-to-back," end quote. So did not really put to bed any speculation, pretty much address my name is going to be out there. And that's because his camp is already trying to plan an exit strategy for him for a Bulls franchise that is as dysfunctional as any franchise as there is in the NBA. Now let's get to Jeff Goodman, the audio I have from him. He was on the field of 68 earlier today. Actually, you'll hear this in the audio exchange text with Billy Donovan. It's about 1 minute 45 seconds long, but some really good stuff here from Jeff Goodman amid his speculation around the Carolina vacancy.
The wild card here is Billy Donovan. That's the wild card. I was texting with him earlier. He didn't give me anything. I think, again, Billy's a very loyal guy. Very loyal. I've said this over and over. He's the coach I miss the most that has left college basketball, whether it's the guys who retire, whether it's the guys who left for the NBA, whoever. The Bulls stink. We know that. He's got a lucrative contract with the Bulls right now. Reinsdorf has been very loyal to him. I think, in turn, he will be loyal to Reinsdorf. However, there are a ton of people in Billy Donovan's circle right now that have told Billy Donovan, get the hell out of there. Get out of there. You can't win with what they've given you, with what Arturas Karnisovas has given you in terms of talent. So go to Carolina and have a chance to win the whole thing again and change your legacy a little bit from, again, being a coach in the NBA that for a long time just hasn't had enough to be able to win at a high level. So the question is, again, would Billy Donovan leave mid-contract? Would Reinsdorf be okay with it? I think if he went to Reinsdorf and said, hey, I got this opportunity here and I'd like to take it, and Reinsdorf said, all right, I can get out from under your very lucrative, I think it's like close to $10 million or something like that a year deal, then Billy might do it. Because, again, I think he's got a lot of people right now pushing him, telling him, hey, go back to college now, go to an elite level job, and you can run this thing.
All right, so there you go. There's Jeff Goodman on Billy Donovan. And as I mentioned, it's not that Carolina would not be interested in him. It's just more the fact that a lot of the interest right now is from Donovan's camp as opposed to Carolina, and Bubba Cunningham, Steve Newmark, and the Chancellor. But you're talking about a guy that in his 21 years at the collegiate level won 502 games, posted a 71% winning percentage. He was 35-20 at Marshall. And then at Florida, he was 467 and 186. He won a regular season conference championship 7 times. He won a conference tournament championship 4 times. He made the NCAA tournament 14 times, posted a 35-12 record, went to 4 Final Fours, and was a back-to-back national champion in 2006, 2007. I'll say this. Would I prefer Carolina to hire a coach that has been out of the college game for over a decade? On the surface, that answer is no. I would much rather have someone that is plugged in, that is living the college basketball life on a day-to-day basis. I understand that he comes from the NBA background might help him with player movement, but the NBA has better regulation than college basketball has. I'll say the biggest issue the NBA has is tanking. College basketball, there's a lot of issues that did not exist in the sport when he left it back in 2014. But you hear basketball people that know him, that know the sport better than I do, that immediately universally say that if he came back to college, he would be the best coach in the sport. Makes you raise your eyebrow, because what have we talked about as Carolina becoming open? If it's the best job in the sport, you know what you should have? You should have the best coach in the sport. And if you were to hire a Lloyd, a May, an Ozelberger, you would have one of the best. But if you were to lure Billy Donovan away, you would maybe have the best coach in the sport. And I do think this, if he were to leave the Chicago Bulls, leave the NBA for Carolina, I think it validates everything that you and I say about this being the best job in college basketball, about this being a coveted job in the basketball community. And you know why? Because Kentucky tried 2 years ago and he wouldn't leave for Kentucky, a place where he was a former assistant at. There have been other teams that have checked in on him as well, and he stayed committed to the NBA life as opposed to coming back to college. If Carolina was the one school that would be able to get him to ask out of his contract with the Bulls and come back and be a college basketball head coach, and you equip him with $15 million, imagine what he's capable of doing. Imagine how quickly he could restore Carolina to the top of the college basketball world, which is where Carolina desires to be. They made that known by firing Hubert Davis.
Yeah, I mean, look, from an X's and O's standpoint, I mean, everything that I've heard about Billy Donovan, is that he is about as good of an X's and O's coach as you could possibly get. There are not many others that do it the way that he does it. That's a reason why the NBA wanted him, because it's not easy to make that transition from college to the NBA, especially, the way that college used to be. Now there are some parallels and it makes a little bit of sense. It would make more sense for him to be a guy that was in college now and went to the NBA, because as you said, there's more restrictions on things. There's more, it's more laid out than it is at the college level, where there's just complete chaos. And so, that's the one thing that I do worry about with him, is being out of the sport for as long as he has been, coming back into the sport now. Is he going to be the same guy that he was when he was here the first time around, when he was at Florida? Is that going to be the same guy that you're going to get? This is also a guy that's 60 years old now. So, where is his energy level in terms of, how long he's going to be able to coach in the game? I mean, I got to tell you, watching the Bulls is enough for me to lose energy. I mean, it is just crazy. They are absolutely one of the worst teams that you could watch. Now, part of it is that they have made some of the worst possible decisions that you could have ever made as a front office. I mean, when they sunk all their money and draft picks into Nikola Vucevic to go along with DeMar DeRozan, that was one of the stupidest moves in the history of the NBA. I mean, that's just poor management, and it has gotten them to a point where, I think they're basically irrelevant in the NBA hierarchy, especially in the Eastern Conference. And I think that's probably going to concern some people. I wouldn't be that concerned with that. That's not Billy Donovan's fault. He's coaching the team that he's given. I don't think he's a guy that's heavily involved in putting together that roster. I mean, I think he has some involvement, but I don't think that he's a guy that's basically putting together the roster himself. I think there's a lot of other hands that are in that cookie jar that unfortunately have gotten them to where they are. And so I look, would I be opposed to it wholeheartedly? No. There's a reason why Kentucky went after him a couple of years ago, because they felt like he was a guy that still had it in the tank, that he was still a guy that would be successful. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has been to the Final Four four times already in his career. And so if he comes back to college basketball and can pick up where he left off, I mean, that's pretty dang good. I mean, you look at, the success that they had. I mean, outside of 07, 08 and 09, 08, 09, which, I thought this was a point that we were talking about earlier today, because this was the one name that the guys on my show really spent a lot of time on today. They were talking about, it's not easy to turn around after winning a national championship back then in those times and just immediately replace the roster. A great example was Carolina after they won it in 08, 09, and they end up losing everybody. The next year was pretty tough. You didn't have the transfer portal that was built up the way that it is now, where you could just fully reload unless you were really recruiting at an incredibly high rate out of the high school ranks. And so even still, you look at the records that he had during those seasons. 24-12. Now, part of that is because they ended up making a run in the NIT. Didn't really make a run in the NIT in the next season when they went 25-11. Those would easily in the modern era of college basketball make the NCAA tournament. You're talking about a team in Auburn who was one game above 500, or no, they may have been 2 games above 500 at the end of the regular season, almost making the NCAA tournament. So nowadays, he would probably make it into the NCAA tournament, even with the records that he had in those seasons. And, just his final year wasn't successful by any stretch of the imagination. It was either the second or third worst season that he had there, dating back to his first 2 years at Florida. But, you look at what he was in 2013, 2014, that was a team that went to the Final Four. The previous 3 years before that, they were Elite Eight teams. So I definitely think that Carolina would sign up for that level of success if he can bring that back to the college level. It's not a guarantee that he would be able to bring that back to the college level. He's not a guy that is right near the top of my list, but he's certainly a guy that has a track record, that has, been able to get to the places that Carolina ultimately wants to go. And I think, if he does have the appetite to get back into college basketball, he's going to land a pretty significant job. So, if Carolina goes through this initial tier that we talked about, which was that top tier of guys, featuring guys like Tommy Lloyd, Dusty May, and TJ Ozelberger, and those guys don't end up wanting to come to Carolina, or you find something that you don't necessarily like, this would be far from the worst hire that the Tar Heels could make.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how his name and the smoke around it develops over the next, I would say, 24, 48, 72 hours. Because the transfer portal opens April 7th, so you've got a little bit of time, but you need to have this thing finished up before the portal opens. And we know that the week of the Final Four, the entire sport pretty much shuts down because everybody's going to be there. And so with that would require him to leave his position during the season. And so I think that's got to be something to monitor. I don't think age is that big of an issue, even though he is 60, 61. I would think that he would still have at least a good 8 to 10 years in the tank. I don't think this would be a 3 to 5 year run. Like, if you were hiring someone that was 65 years or older, I think he would really want to have an extended run here to really cement himself as a legend at the collegiate level after what he would have done at the NBA level. With that being said, though, these are the names that you should be hearing, and these are the names that you expect this job to attract. We did have a comment here on YouTube saying you are aiming too high. None of these big names want a mediocre job. Everything that's been reported in the last 24 hours would tell you that, first off, this is not a mediocre job. This is the best job in the sport. It's a top 3 to 5 job in all of college athletics when you take football and basketball into account. And the names are going to be interested. It's why that's why Nate Oates is not even in the initial tier list that Carolina has listed, but his camp has made it known there's interest on his part. I do think, Todd Golden has a $16 million buyout, but if he didn't have the off the court issues that he has with that Title IX lawsuit that, yes, has been settled, but there's some baggage that could come with that, I think that would be a name that Carolina would be pursuing very extensively. And that would be like if that's my number one choice of all the possible candidates. He's just not listed, so there's really no point in me talking about him. I'm going to write about him, but for what we're doing here as a podcast, really not a whole lot there to talk about until his name becomes, a lot more serious. So, I think you gotta commend Bubba Cunningham, Steve Newmark, Chancellor Roberts. You've got the search firm in here. You make a decision like with Hubert and the dysfunction that was in that decision. You've got to swing big. You've got to bring in a home run hire. You've got to bring in a really big fish. And that's what they're set out to do. And I think it's going to happen. I don't think we'll be coming back on here in a week, 2 weeks from now and saying Carolina failed, that Carolina was not able to land the person that they sought to get. If they do, it's going to be a real poor reflection on this athletic department and this administration. Because every time this job has conceivably come open, there's always been big interest in it because of what the job, how the standing it has in the basketball community. We'll have to wait and see how this thing ultimately does play out. I think this weekend will be a big weekend to say, depending on if any of these targets advance to the Final Four, that maybe could delay things just a bit. But I think if you see a Lloyd, an Ozelberger, a Dusty May get home Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, you could really see steam pick up in a really big direction, and Carolina maybe try to have this thing done by early as next week. Ultimately, we will just have to wait and see. But I think for as disappointing as last night's news was, and just the fact that it was a firing, not a resignation, not a mutual parting of ways, I do think you got to feel really good if you're a Carolina fan that they're about to put their big boy pants on and they're about to go try to bring in a big name. This job should attract, and we'll just have to wait and see how it ultimately plays out. And the good news is, guys, is we're going to be here with you every single step of the way. This is obviously right now the biggest focus for us as a podcast and for us as a website, which is where we'll direct you to next. That's HeelToughBlog.com. We had the article up this morning about the Brad Stevens news. The second that Matt Norlander reported that, I made sure we had something up about Brad Stevens pulling his name out of the hat. Next up is a dual article of Anthony and I putting together our wish list. So this is where I'm going to write about Todd Golden and why I wish he was a much more serious candidate for the job. That'll be coming out. That'll be dropped on the website sometime tomorrow regarding unless there's other news with the potential coaching candidate. We will have our wish list article out on the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com tomorrow. And, of course, spring football is underway in Chapel Hill. Bill Belichick held his press conference yesterday that announced there will be some guys who will not be with the team for the spring. Anthony has you covered about who those players are and how that will impact the spring practice for Carolina football. Any other news and notes that come out of spring football, of course, we'll have you covered as well. All that great coverage, Carolina football, Carolina basketball, that's HeelToughBlog.com. As for the podcast, you know where to find us. All you have to do is search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. This is back-to-back nights we're recording. Very good chance we're going to be back on here tomorrow night recording as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show during this UNC basketball coaching search. If you're a video consumer to the podcast, if you're new to us, if you just found us in the last day or so, the best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow us on Twitter at HTB_Josh for me, at HTB Anthony for him. The links are posted to both of our accounts the second we go live. you can be notified. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. Another busy night in the chat. Way too many comments for us to go through. Did want to address one though before we got out of here. Our guy Brandon McLean did comment saying, "Is Josh sick? He sounds incredibly low energy the last 3 to 4 pods." I am not sick. Full disclosure, and I don't mind throwing my roommate under the bus. I have a roommate that has voiced displeasure with how loud the podcast can be at times. So trying to be respectful of that so I don't get evicted, but all is good. I'm not sick. The energy is not low, just trying to be respectful of others in my surroundings, if you will. But that's why we want you here. We love having those comments. We love being able to interact and engage with you guys. You can do that on Facebook, YouTube, or over on Twitter. Just make sure you're liking and following all those pages. The second that we go live, you can be a part of our conversation, talking and covering Carolina basketball. But with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.